Welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined as always by Dakota Lasky. Dak, what's going on, man? How are you?
Not much is going on, man. Not much is going on. Yeah, no, I can't really think of much. I've just been, chilling, vibing, hanging out. I've been playing some SSX Tricky recently, which is one of my favorite GameCube games. Yeah, I love that game. I've been playing that recently, downloaded that for Dolphin, so that's been fun. Yeah, otherwise, just been enjoying the nice weather, and not much else. How you doing, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, about the same. It seems like every week there's not, things are still closed, so there's not much to do, not much exciting going on in the world. I didn't actually even tell you this, but I did start playing what potentially could be our next inspired by Metroid game. So that's something, but I don't want to give too many details on that away just yet. But yeah, man, not much else. I was enjoying, it was a beautiful day here on Saturday, and then it was covered in snow on Sunday. So that's kind of how, living by the Rocky Mountains works. You never know what you're going to get. But we know that we're going to get a good episode today because we are back for our second ever definitive ranking episode. And I am super excited about this one, actually. I had a blast talking about Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. If you have not checked out that episode, man, you got to go and check it out. We had some great discussion. Of course, the general premise here is that we have broken each Metroid game down by 10 categories that we really feel make a Metroid game. And we're rating them on a scale of 1 to 5. So today is all about Metroid Fusion, man, and I'm excited to get into it. But before we do, we got an exciting announcement for next week's episode. Of course, you heard us plug a bunch of times last week on our Inspired by Metroid Shadow Complex episode that we had started our own Discord server. And we are really hoping that all you guys listening to this make the decision to head on over and join our Discord server, talk some Metroid with us, talk some whatever with us. I feel like we were talking about a bunch of different stuff in there, some really cool stuff. And by God, we are having our first ever Discord AMA. You can ask us a Metroid question, whatever you want, and next week we will answer it here on the show. So next week is going to be a Discord AMA. If you want to get your questions in, join the Omega Metroid Discord. It's a pretty fun place to hang out.
Yeah, I guess it would be an AUA, right? Because it would be an Ask Us.
Yeah, I guess so.
Unless you want to hog all the questions, man. But usually we get some really good questions from the listeners, and by usually I mean every time. So definitely looking forward to that. I love doing the Q&A episodes. I know you love doing the Q&A episodes. So yeah, it should be dope.
Yeah, I love those episodes because, well, we really don't have to do anything, and we just. We kind of steal the great ideas of our listeners.
Yeah, that's true. But, I think we also we have a bunch of listeners that give us some ideas that we never would have thought of, too. And that's always fun because I'm like, wow, that's a topic I didn't even think to talk about. Or we talk about some music, in which we have people like Duminal who are really well-versed on that kind of stuff and throw out 5-6 different tracks, the deep tracks, the deep cuts, stuff like that. That's why I love doing the Q&As because we have some even bigger Metroid fans out there than we are. So, but yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, no doubt. And, another reason that these shows are great is it's a really good opportunity to talk about things that maybe on their own they don't have quite enough stake behind them to make a full episode, but we can at least bite into them on these Q&A episodes in shorter form. So once again, if you are not a member of our Discord, please consider joining and getting your questions in. We have a channel dedicated for that, and we're going to be pinging everybody probably later this week. We'll do it a few times, and you can get your question answered on the show next week. But enough shilling aside, we are here this week to definitively rank Metroid Fusion, and I'm ready for this because you and I. Metroid Fusion, I think, was one of your first, if not your first, Metroid games. Wasn't my first. We've talked about our kind of differences before, so I'm really excited to see where, how different we can get. Because I think for the most part, we were somewhat fairly consistent on Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and I think that this one might be a little bit of a deviation on our rankings.
I think so because I know for sure how I'm ranking this game, and I know that you don't agree with how I'm gonna rank it. So, yeah, but this was, I mean, I guess I got Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion at the same time, but this was my first 2D Metroid. So, yeah.
Right. And you know what? We gave this caveat at the beginning of the Echoes episode, and I think it warrants repeating here. Of course, we're going to be, extra. We're going to put our critics hat on here, and when we look at these games, because we're trying to critique it in a constructive way. You know what? The worst Metroid game is still a really good game. Dak, you might disagree with that. Actually,
whoa! Wait! No. No,
all right,
it's not.
I
No,
know
it's
what you're.
not.
Let's just pretend that doesn't exist, and let's just say that generally speaking, okay, the worst Metroid game is still a really solid game. Like I could give, I could give
can't
a lot
co-sign
of
that.
Metroid games low scores, but like still really enjoy playing them. So I feel like that just bears repeating as we get going here.
Okay.
Where
That's how you sit. I'm not gonna sit on that side, but I will say that on average, like almost every Metro game is pretty good, which I think is a pretty reasonable statement.
I think that there's like some exceptions which everyone listening probably knows about, but those exceptions aside, I think the most Metroid games are pretty good. But let's just get right into it here because I feel like we have a lot of ground to cover. Again, the categories that we are going to be ranking this game from 1 to 5 on are art style, story, pacing and progression, gameplay and combat, items and abilities, areas, enemies and bosses, expansions and collectibles, and music and sound design. So, Dak, let's get it kicked off with the art style. Do you want to go first?
I think honestly you should go first because I'm very interested in how you're gonna. I want to know how you're gonna go on every single department, on every single category. So I want you to go first, at least at the beginning.
Okay. I give it a 3. It's not the best. It's not the worst. I like the design of the fusion suit. So that it's not my favorite suit, and I do kind of miss like the big dominant shoulder pads and stuff like that. But it's different, and I think that works. I wasn't crazy about the Ridley design of this game, and some of the bosses and some of the enemies are like a little bit exaggerated for my liking, but for the most part, I think that everything looks really solid. The cutscenes for what they are look really nice. I think that this category just like really comes down to how you feel about the fusion suit and how it looks. The graphics are what they are. They look fine. Nothing out of this world, nothing spectacular, but solid and do the job. So I think that, actually, now that I say solid and does the job would pretty much how I would sum up the art style department of Metroid Fusion. So I like the fusion suit, not my favorite suit in the series, but I think that it's cool and at least something different. I think the design of the X was cool. So I gave it a 3.
All right, well, I'm going to give this a 5 because of a number of reasons. Number one, if we're going to start with the suit, I love the fusion suit. I think the fusion suit is such a cool idea. Has that like awesome, visceral, like organic look to it that like makes perfect sense with the story. It even changes the visor, looks so cool. And of course, it makes a great contrast with the SIX, which is like the classic Samus look. The reason why I'm really giving Metroid Fusion a 5 is because aside from the fact that I love the fusion suit, I love the enemy designs. Like Nightmare is such a cool enemy design. The zombie scientists, the Omega Metroid, all the bosses. I think the Ridley design's really cool. It makes sense. Like, okay, he's not like the actual Ridley. He's a clone of Ridley, so it's like a derivative of it. It's not like an exact clone because the X don't like exactly clone things. And it looks like more monstrous and like has like these like really small wings, but like the monstrous head, like all looks awesome. Aside of that though, but one of the things that was really important to me and sticks out to me a lot in Metroid Fusion, especially when I replayed it recently for this episode, was, and this is great contrast with Shadow Complex, what we just played, was that like Metroid Fusion has all these different areas that like just stand out in my memory like so hard, like the the frozen area, you have like all these different destroyed backgrounds when you're like deep, like condensed in like all like the vegetation. I think like Sector 4.
Mm-hmm.
When you're fighting the Omega Metroid and you can like see out into space as like the ship is open, like there's like the room when you're hiding away from the SAX and like the shadow is like cast a little bit like against the wall, and like the light is like open like on her. I don't know. I've so many areas in this game are so iconic to me. I love like the design of how they approach all these different enemy types and bringing them and like modifying them from their original look from like a previous game. Even Samus's look is completely different, and that stood out to me a lot considering like Metroid Prime, her various suit is pretty standard coming from Super Metroid. I thought that was awesome. The SAX is so cool. Yeah, I 100% a 5 for me, especially on the Game Boy Advance. Like, obviously it's not looking like a 2021 game, but for 2001, 2002, early 2000s game, I thought it looked really good. Way better, obviously, than like the beta version of Fusion that was shown, that I think was shown at like a Space World 2000, something like that. Right. Even like the redesign of like the ship is really cool. Like I really don't think Fusion misses a step in like the redesigns, like the logo, the modifying the text so it kind of looks more alien-y and like a little more fluid. 100% a 5 for me. The Metroid Fusion look is like the design of like 2D Metroid that I love the most. Definitely a 5.
Okay. I can appreciate that, and I think that I'm probably going to say this a few times here, but I mean the technology definitely holds this game back, and that's just why I think that this game is so ripe for a remake. Because imagine like 2021 Switch remake and like the Fusion suit, you can see it like moving on Samus, like it looks alive, kind of like the proto molecule from.
I mean, they could do it.
Expanse, yeah, that would be sick. But I think that it gets the job done. I don't have the same kind of nostalgia that you do, but that's totally okay. All right, well, let's move on and let's get to the story of the game. And so you want me to go first here?
Yeah, I want you to go first.
All right,
go for it.
So this one, it was really tough for me because I think that the story is mostly pretty solid, but I almost think that there's too much story, which blends into the next section. And not that there's too much story, but in my mind, it could have been a little bit simpler. And you know where I'm going with this too. The amount of times that you have to talk to Adam and he tells you the story versus showing the story, I don't necessarily love, but I do really love the idea that the Galactic Federation is corrupt and like they're breeding Metroids on their own. So I rated this a 3, and I would have rated it a 4 if not for Adam, because I always thought, and I still think, that like the Galactic Federation using his consciousness in an AI was like ridiculous. And I know that we're in like this sci-fi series and it shouldn't be ridiculous, but I remember even when I was like a kid and I played Metroid Fusion in Christmas of 2002, I was just like, oh, okay, well, like I guess that they found a way to bring him back, and it was kind of obvious that like since they were bringing up Adam at the beginning of the game and Samus was recalling her commanding officer, that like he was gonna play a role in this game somehow. It was just a question of how, and I always just thought that was a little bit disappointing, the coming back in AI form. I thought that it could have been a cooler way to do it, like maybe he didn't die or something like that. Obviously, we didn't have Other M back at the time, but I feel like that critique has always stuck with me. I would have really just loved to have the game like centered on the SAX is hunting you. You have to go repair the ship, from all the damage it's causing, and you slowly find out the shady dealings of the Galactic Federation without like so much text and so much narrative. I know you probably disagree with that, but
yeah, I completely disagree with that. Yeah, I'm giving it a 5 again. I love the story of this game, and I mean, unless you had something to add to that, yeah, I mean, I feel like, well, first of all, compared to Other M, dude, there's not. I mean, I think the entire text in this game and like every cutscene in this game could be fit within one other M cutscene. Like it's not that much. Like I've never ever felt that Fusion had that much text or story really. And I think the story is pretty simple. And most of the details that are are more backstory-ish or like revelations are kind of backloaded in the end of the game. Like Adam doesn't really tell you that stuff. Mostly Adam's just kind of telling you where to go next. He's the relevant story details aren't spoon-fed to you all the time. They're mostly as a result of him giving you a directive and then you do it and then something happens. And that's what I like about the game too, is that sometimes you go off that path or you can explore a little more. Like when you have to avoid the elevator so the elevator power goes down. I thought the Adam AI thing was, I mean, I never questioned that as a kid. I always thought that was cool. Like, oh, like someone that she used to know in the past, like is alive again, really, but not really, because they never like made it seem like it's Adam. It was an AI that was constructed from his brain, right? So it's not really him, but it kind of is. And so she's kind of like wrestles with that throughout the story. And I always, as a kid, I always like, oh, that's cool. Like, it's not just like, oh, it's a commanding officer. It's not how it is in Other M, where it's just so simple and plain and dumb. This game gives a little nuance to it. It's not really the same person, so Samus doesn't really know how to act around someone who is a representation of someone she knew and who she cared about, but is also a computer program and is just kind of doing its job. But is it really, And there's that ambiguity there. And then, of course, you have the Federation stuff, which I always thought was cool. I thought like that little like extra like Easter egg cutscene that you can find is awesome. The SAX hunting you. I mean, some of the story moments. I mean, when you're avoiding the SAX and you can't take it down yet, that's some of the best story moments in Metroid, 100%. So many other games in the Metroid franchise don't even rival moments that are in Fusion, as far as I'm concerned. And I also love the elevator moments when Samus is like reflecting really quickly. In Other M, she's like going on and on and on and on and saying like mostly obvious stuff. In Fusion, it's not that. I would say it's somewhat similar writing, but I don't think it's nearly as bad. I mean, honestly, I think it's mostly pretty solid. Like, she's reflecting in a logical way. She doesn't go on and on and on. And she only does it on the elevators, which makes is a logical place where she would do it. I think she's a way stronger character in that sense. And the other characters in the story aren't annoying or poorly written either. So I like that. It's a game that I've always that's the thing I love about Metroid Fusion over Super Metroid is with Super Metroid, I like the, not sandboxy, but just like freestyle nature of the game where you just kind of go on and you figure out the story, very bare bones of it as you go along and you kind of adventure. But Fusion, I think it has both elements where it's like you get to adventure, but I still have a story, which I like. I love Fusion's story. It's definitely my favorite 2D Metroid story. Definitely giving it a 5.
Yeah, I actually don't disagree with what you said about the SAX. I think my thing is like there's not enough of that for me. I just think Adam drags the story down from the from the character being in there in general. And I don't mind Samus recalling him in the elevators either. I think that's actually fine. But like just his introduction into the game, he's a cold character that they just made up. I realize that
he's a computer program.
There isn't. Well, but hear me out. So, he's cool. I realize that Samus, there's not a ton of characters to draw from in Metroid at that point that, they could have made up or brought back for this. But, when I was playing it, I was just like, oh, who's Adam? I don't really care. And I just, all the scenes that you have to talk with him, the amount of time, and the reveal, which I just thought was kind of hokey. If it were up to me, I think that it could have just really done a solid job of just focusing on the Galactic Federation and SAX, and that is like some pitch perfect storytelling device right there. Adam, he's never done it for me, and I feel like I've said that before. He's not my favorite, so I wanted to go higher. I wrestled with it, but I think a 3 is appropriate for me.
All right.
Well, Dak, this next one, pacing and progression. I've talked about this before. There are 2 categories for 2 Metroid games that I can think of where if I could give a 0 instead of a 1, I would give that. But I'm giving this a 1. I think that this is the worst paced, maybe the worst paced Metroid game in the series. The amount of times you have to understand, I grew up with Super Metroid, where you can just go, you can figure out the story, you can the world is the story, and you can explore it to your heart's content. You can go to any area that you can get to. You can soak up the atmosphere. You can soak up the world, and you can just and I feel like you can go, and if you know what you're doing, you can do the game really quickly, and it has great pacing. Or you can take your time and just do things your way. This game, if you want to go quickly, does not allow you to do that. You have to stop. You have to listen to Adam. You have to listen to the objective. You have to confirm your objective. And again, this is kind of a fault of the technology at the time, because the Game Boy Advance screen is only so big, so there's only so much text that they can fit on it. I'm sure that if they remade this, they would either hopefully they would get rid of the text altogether and just have voice acting kind of play over while you move, or at least the text box would be like 4 times as big, so you wouldn't have to stand there for as long. But I hate the fact in Fusion that I just want to explore everywhere, and I can't do it because half the place is locked down. I just want to go. I just want to see what's on this station, and not only can I not do that, but I have to sit through endless amount of text from Adam before I can do that. And this probably plays into my dislike of the story by association. So these are probably not as far removed as maybe they should be, but I just the pacing to me in this game just drives me absolutely nuts, because I just want to explore, and this game does not let you do that. You have to, it's as far as a Metroid game go, it's a very linear experience, and I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing, but I just want to go, man. I just want to be free and not have to get bogged down with confirming objectives, going into the research station again or whatever to talk to Adam, or the navigation station. Sorry, this is not a good one for me. This is a 1. What say you, Dak?
Well, I mean, I'll agree. There are points when you play this game and I'm just kind of mashing through the text. I'm like, all right, let's go. But at the same time, I don't mind those moments of having to stop and go to the navigation screen and talk to Adam, especially when it's helpful. And I almost maybe, back then when I was playing the game as a kid, to remember where I was supposed to go. Nowadays, I don't remember, mind it too much, because it kind of breaks up the long paces of you not interacting with things sometimes. But yeah, I definitely agree with a remake. They could quicken that up a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, this is a game that is one you can beat in a day pretty swiftly. It's a couple hour, maybe few hour experience, especially if you've played it a bunch of times. This is the Metroid game I've played the most, because it's really not that long. I've always felt the pacing progression was great in that way, because you're not playing it forever. You're not just wandering around and lost to where to go. I like that I can just I've played this game so many times, I just blur through it start to finish. And I loved it for that way, because it was a fun adventure that I could go through and not spend forever, an entire weekend or a week playing it or something like that. So that being said, I hear what you're saying on just wanting to go on an adventure, but at the same time, I've never felt super bogged down in that way. I was interested enough in finding out what was happening on the station that I didn't want to just go wander around and look at some dirt on the ground, or I don't know, look for missile upgrades or whatever. I guess that's just not what I was motivated to do. There was an interesting story in front of me, and I was I'm going to go pursue that. And this computer's telling me where to go and progress the plot. I'm oh, well, I'm interested in the plot, so I'm going to go that way. So that's kind of how I've always felt about it. That being said, I'm going to give it a 4, because it's not perfect for sure. Certainly parts of the game I would speed up a little bit, but at the same time, I've always felt this game is pretty well paced. It makes for a well and concise playthrough in a single sitting, I think, especially if you played the game a lot, and you don't even have to really be a speedrunner to beat this game pretty swiftly, I think. So yeah, that's something that's always stuck with me, is that you can, it's not very long, and I kind of like it so in that way. So I'm going to give it a 4.
Ooh, I respect that. I respect your position, but I do not agree, sir, but that's okay, because that's what this is all about.
You're not going to agree with anything I'm going to say here. I'm going to be giving all high numbers, I think, except in maybe one category, and I'm sure you can guess that one.
Yeah, I'm sure I can guess it too. All right, well, Dak, take the lead on gameplay and combat. What say you?
Gameplay and combat. Gameplay and combat. Yeah, so gameplay and combat for me is I don't know. I mean, I gotta give it a 5. I feel like this is like quintessential 2D Metroid for me at least, right? And I think for you, it's definitely Super Metroid, and I
Hmm.
understand that. For me, I love Metroid Fusion. I feel like Samus controls really comfortably. She feels a little, I don't know. I don't know what the word is for when I play Super Metroid. Maybe like slippery or something. I don't
I've heard
know.
people say floaty before.
Floaty, maybe floaty, yeah, but like I like how she feels in Fusion much more than I do in Super Metroid. I enjoy the boss battles. I enjoy the level design. I mean, again, a number of uh, very iconic like gameplay moments in Fusion that I just really can't tear myself away from. Again, I got to go back to that, chase scene with the SAX. That's one of my favorite Metroid gameplay sequences of all time. Um, and I would love for a remake to come out and like extend that a little bit and make it even like scarier and harder.
Hmm.
That'd be
Yeah.
awesome. I would love that because going back and now that I've gone back to it as an adult, that sequence isn't as long as I remember, but probably it just felt longer as a kid because I was like freaking out. Um,
And dying a lot too.
exactly, yeah. But like that kind of stuff, I love. Like this game has one of the things that this game does really well with the gameplay is the anticipation. It's so real. It's so good at like setting up scenes that you're like looking forward to playing in, or like creating like a sequence that's exciting. Like the Ridley boss fight's a really good setup because you see like the Ridley corpse earlier, and I think that's a fun fight because it's like in a little tight room. And we've talked about that boss fight before. Like the security boss, the box drone, security drone right there, the security robot. That's one of my favorite boss fights in a Metroid game. I love like climbing on the monkey bars and shooting down, jumping around on it. The Ceres boss fight really good too, and I think all the
Hmm.
different areas. I mean, combined with all the different upgrades we'll get to later, I think makes for a really. I mean, one of the best Game Boy Advance games I think in terms of gameplay, and certainly one of the best, if not the best 2D Metroid in my opinion. Certainly love it. And yeah, would love to see it remade. I gotta give it a 5 because it's my favorite 2D Metroid, and I've played it so many times. I love the gameplay for sure.
Yeah, I respect that. I went a little bit lower, but not a whole lot. I gave it a 3, and I'll explain, I guess, my rationale here because to like when I say gameplay in combat and stuff to me, like gameplay almost is like in my mind like what's the gimmick of this game? Like, or maybe gimmick is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like, Metroid Prime was like the first like 3D Metroid, and it was the first person Metroid, whereas like Echoes kind of did the dual world thing. Corruption, you could switch planets, and you had all the motion control stuff, and like Super Metroid obviously defined 2D gaming in a lot of ways in Metroidvania gaming. Um, so when I'm thinking about Fusion, like it basically is just like a sequel to Super Metroid, which is there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I'm not sure that like the gimmick or like the big hook of this game added a whole lot of new stuff. What I came up with when I was thinking of this was like so it added the X and it added the SAX chase scenes, and I love the SAX chase scenes, but you are correct. They're not as prevalent and they're not as long as we all like to remember. And the X basically just replace like drop offs from enemies in Super Metroid, like the little purple orbs that you'd get. So they're not like story wise they have a big implication, but like gameplay wise they don't necessarily. I know that they infect bosses and stuff, but like in terms of like literal gameplay, they don't really affect much. So I think that it doesn't necessarily add a whole lot new to the Metroid formula other than those wicked chase scenes, but it certainly doesn't do anything wrong by it either. So yeah, I gave this one a 3. Right in the
Uh,
middle for me.
I gotta definitely disagree with that X point because I definitely think they added a lot to the gameplay. One thing that I don't like about, I mean, not that I don't like, but one thing that I think the X improved on compared to like regular power ups is that like in Metroid Prime and Super Metroid, it's a gamified thing, right? It's very video gamey. Like this power up, which wouldn't exist in like a real world, is floating there for Samus, right? Whereas Metroid Fusion, the X are a real living thing, and gameplay wise, they're more dynamic. They're moving around. They can run away from you. You gotta sometimes go and catch them. You gotta try to get in their path and pick them up. They're not just something that's sitting there or something that you can suck up and make them move over to you. So they definitely change the gameplay at least a little bit. And sometimes they're even enemies that you have to deal with later in the game. So it's like a pickup that is not necessarily always just a power up. So I definitely disagree there. definitely change. I wouldn't say they changed the Metroid formula, but they certainly added a different spice and flavor to it. It wasn't just a regular pickup. Now all of a sudden it's a more dynamic component of the gameplay. And I always felt that it made it a little more immersive. You know, you have this thing moving around. It's, you know, the sound effects swirling and whatnot, and you're trying to go and catch it sometimes, and or something you just ignore it, and or you try to race over and get to it before it goes into an enemy and respawns and creates another enemy in the room. That definitely changes the gameplay that a power-up doesn't do. So yeah, I definitely disagree that they don't change things. They were important to the plot, and I thought they really were a good mix-up on, again, it didn't reinvent the wheel, but I definitely thought they added to the Metroid formula and were an improvement on regular pickups, and were definitely one of my favorite parts of the game. And I should have added that to my initial point too.
That's fair, and I see what you're saying. I see where you're coming from. They just, like, I don't know, they didn't do the same for me. I think it was just kind of like, okay, well, I've defeated this boss. Now I just have to defeat this, like, really easy floating thing that I can beat with, like, a couple of missile shots, and, like, it was just kind of like an extra barrier to the power up.
I guess, but I'm talking
sure.
about, like, not even those. I'm talking about just, like, even pickups. You know, like, there are certain rooms where you kill a bunch of X, and then you have, like, the silhouettes in the background, and you got to, like, run over and try to get the X, or sometimes they just go over instantly and they respawn more enemies. I'm not just talking about, like, power ups, even just regular pickups like health and missiles.
Like, you know what? Actually, what would have been cool, now that you say that, and Fusion does this, like, once in a while, but not very often, is sometimes you'll kill an X parasite, and then you'll have to wait for it to reform as, like, another enemy, and then you can, like, freeze it. Like, that would have been cool if they did that a little bit more. Like, that would have factored into my gameplay ranking a little bit more. But, like, it's really, really sparse that something like that happens in the game. Usually it's just like, you kill it, you gotta chase it, you collect it, perfect. Yeah,
I mean, I guess agree to disagree. I feel like it happens enough in the game. It doesn't happen too much, but I definitely don't agree that it happens a sparse amount. But yeah, I definitely give it a 5. I feel like the Metroid formula here feels as dynamic as it probably ever had at that point, until probably Samus returns, or I guess Zero Mission, obviously.
All right, well, let's agree to disagree on this next one too, because I'm not a fan of the items and abilities in this game as it pertains to Metroid Fusion. I gave it a 1. And okay. I gave it a 1 because I feel like it doesn't add anything. Like, it literally takes all of the items from Super Metroid, and that's your arsenal. You do have the ice missiles, granted, for sure. But, you know, it's the same. I feel like it was a missed opportunity. You have this new suit. You have, you know, this really cool look. But you've got you've got the speed booster. You've got the wave beam, you've got the screw attack. Like, there wasn't anything new or dynamic or, like, unique to Fusion other than the ice missiles, which, if I'm being honest, I don't know that I loved those really more than just, like, a regular ice beam. So yeah, I feel like we're gonna go in opposite directions here again. But I was always a little bit disappointed that there wasn't something that really, like, I don't know, like, it was an item that, like, maybe I was looking for something akin to, like, the Hyper Beam in Metroid Prime 3 that, like, used the X as fuel or something, or, like, I don't know, but something. You know, this game is so different than a lot of other Metroid games that it was disappointing to me to just have the same old items come in, and, like, those are your staples. And I know that, you know, there's a reason for that story-wise, but it still leaves me a little bit wanting. So yeah, I'm going 1, Dak.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too far off on that. I give it a 3, just for really the same reasons. I don't think it qualifies a 1 though, but I mean, at least for me, you know, Metroid's upgrades are still good, you know, and at least for the first time playing Metroid Fusion, I hadn't played Super Metroid, so this is my first experience with those power-ups in 2D Metroid, so I thought, oh, this is great. And I always liked the diffusion missile as well. But yeah, you know, Metroid Fusion doesn't really do anything different in terms of, like, upgrades. It's more of like a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but it's certainly not innovative. So that's why I gave it a 3. Like, it's not bad because they're Metroid upgrades and they work really well in, like, the flow of the game and the cycle of, like, how the game progresses. Like, the game is really well constructed around those upgrades, and I personally really like the diffusion missiles, and I would love for them to come back, and it's a really cool name, and they look really cool. But yeah, other than that, there's not really too much going on, so I gave it a 3. It's like, par for the course. Not great, not bad. That's right. How I saw it.
Yeah, and I'm surprised actually. I thought that since this was your first, you might be more
Well,
lenient with that.
yeah, I guess I'm kind of like, because I'm trying to look at it as like, okay, like my impressions from when if this is my first Metroid, but at the same time, like looking at it overall, right? Like,
Right, right.
like my impressions from the beginning when I first played the game. Of course, I hadn't experienced these, but at the same time, I'm probably maybe being a little more lenient on like the graphics because obviously I can't change the fact that they're Game Boy Advance graphics from November 2002 in 2021. But yeah, in this sense, I would say Metroid. They could have at the time, even in 2002, they still could have done more. Like this kind of game, I
Mm-hmm.
think could have. It would have been nice to have maybe one, maybe not even. I don't think they could have gone too, or I don't think they needed to go too much farther. Right? I think that they went like if the fusion missile was in the right idea, like the right direction. If they
That was
added
the right path. Yeah.
exactly, if they added like one or two more like upgrades like that, that maybe put a little more of a twist on the prior upgrades. Like maybe if they gave us a different version of the screw attack, or maybe a different version of the shine spark, something like that, just ever so different, that was more characteristic to Fusion rather than Super Metroid, that would have been perfect because it wasn't like it wouldn't be overloading us with new stuff, but it would be nice twists on the old stuff that we know, plus adding that familiar stuff that we played with before. That would have been great. Maybe in a Fusion remake we might get that, but yeah, I'll give it a 3 for what it is.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I think that's perfectly summed up. And it's funny too because like all of these same, or a lot of these same items rather, are in like Metroid Prime, and I would rate those quite highly because they were like different spins in a new dimension on
Exactly.
that. So it's just yeah, it's a little bit funny how that works. But all right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about all of the different areas in this game, and there's a lot of them. Dak, what do you think?
So obviously they're based on areas from like a previous game somewhat. Another place somewhat. Other M definitely didn't do the bottle ship area like thing right, but I think Fusion did the whole like secluded on a ship but with different areas thing pretty well. Um, it made sense how they were like breeding all the different organisms and whatnot and species of animals and aliens on the ship. And I think personally, like just looking at the areas, like the different sectors themselves, I always thought they were really cool. Like they felt very distinct, right? Like going back to Shadow Complex, we played that. Like every
Mm-hmm.
area in that game is just like a gray factory or brown cave rock, Like the best part of the game as far as I was concerned was towards the end of the game where you're up on top of the surface and you're fighting on the lake and you're fighting in the forest and you're fighting on like not a factory but like a base or whatever, and there's nuclear warheads and a ship and all of that. That like the game felt way more diverse in that way. Metroid Fusion I love because it has the ship itself, which feels kind of alive in a way because you have the AI working with you and the SAX roaming that and the remnants of what used to be working on that ship, and you're opening things up and whatnot. And then you have the different sectors that are characters in their own way and sometimes like affect the environment, and obviously that locks you out in the classic kind of Metroid way. And you have to go, get new upgrades to get to these different areas. I think it does things pretty well. I at the same time, it's not like again reinventing the wheel or anything. I would give it a 4. Um, I think some areas of the game were not like super exciting, and but then like other like I love like the nighttime area. I'm trying to remember all the different sector numbers now, right? The knock sector
Oh
6, I
god,
think knock
Sector
NOC.
6, knock.
Yeah, sector
Yeah.
6. Yeah, that one I love that area. Like the frozen one too. Like those I really love. Um, yeah, I think I'm gonna go with a 4. I think the thing is that Metroid Fusion has pretty solid consistency in terms of its environments, and that's why I hated Other M because it felt like such a cheap like ripoff what Fusion had already done. But Fusion, I think, in its way, did a pretty solid job of like the recreating environments on like a ship trope that sci-fi does sometimes, and it made sense in the context of the story, and it didn't lock you into one kind of area in a Metroid game. It allowed you to like traverse all these different kind of areas, which for a Game Boy Advance game in 2002 like made sense, right? Like I'm coming from playing like other like Super Mario Brothers games and whatnot on my Game Boy Advance was going to release, and like I don't know, it made sense like going to all different levels. Like there's the ice area, there's the hot desert area, there's the jungle area. But Fusion did it in its own way. I love like when you can, and then like you can go behind the scenes kind of, you're like going behind the walls and you're traversing like the electrical areas and the elevator. Those sections I love too. So yeah, I would give a 4 for me. For the areas.
Okay. Okay. So we don't do half points on this show, and there's two categories coming up here that I would have given half points to. So for areas, I rounded down, and for this other category, I rounded up. So my answer, I'm going to give it a 2. My answer probably would have been a 2.5, but I'm just going to give it a 2. The expression "jack of all trades, master of none" kind of comes to my mind when I'm thinking of the areas of Metroid Fusion. There's a lot of areas, and they are themed, and they're all like kind of cool in their own way. But I feel like they're almost all too like small to really bite your teeth into and sink into.
That's fair.
Some of them are obviously bigger than others, but like, you know, especially the first section is like quite small, and like another thing that I never really cared for about the sections of Metroid Fusion is there's not a lot of points of interconnectivity, which I'm a big fan of in Metroid. There is towards like the latter parts of the game, but like they're pretty hard to access and to get to if you don't like, you know, have the right power-ups or know where you're going. So yeah, I don't know. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of them. I do think that they do the whole spaceship thing really well, and there is color, thank God. You know, especially if you're comparing to Shadow Complex, there's more color in this 2002 Game Boy Advance game than there is in that game. So I do like that. Yeah, I don't know. They're kind of like, they're a little bit. It's like eating a steak bite instead of eating a steak, you know. And like I think I would have been more okay with like 5 or even 4 or 5 like really well fleshed out, really well defined areas versus like, I think that there's 7, maybe 8 if you count the restricted zone areas in this game. So it spread them a little bit thin and kind of diluted them a little bit for me. Again, nothing inherently wrong with them, but not like not. I wouldn't say that any area in Metroid Fusion is going to be in contention for like this is one of the best areas of Metroid. I think that that's probably fair to say.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but I would have to go back and think which one would be my pick. But, you know, it's not, I don't think like Fusion's like on the par of like Metroid Prime in terms of having those picks. But I don't know. I like that you do kind of go back between the sectors. You might not like walk a literal direct path between them, but you do go back and forth between the sectors, taking the elevators. And again, I do like the segments in between that break those areas up where you're traversing the main hub of the ship rather than the different sectors. I guess I just never had that expectation because I considered the game just one big area rather than like one small hub and then all different areas that I would expect to be much bigger. I just considered all one big area and that you move between those areas. All, you know, I never felt like the lack of disconnect between areas in that way that you seem to have, because I feel like all the areas are pretty sufficiently connected. Like, it makes sense they're not literally connected because they're supposed to be like isolated environments for some scientific purposes, but at the same time, you do go back and forth between them throughout the game. You do go between them not only through the elevators up and down, but also, elsewhere behind, in ways that weren't meant to. The station wasn't expecting you to go that way, essentially. So yeah, I definitely, I guess my perspective on it is different than yours, but when I looked at it, just one big ship rather than like 6 or 7 or 8 areas that could be bigger. I guess that's why I don't have the same problem.
Right. And like, I mean, for context too, like, I'm playing this after I played Super Metroid, after I played Metroid on the NES, after I played Metroid Prime, which are all like very interconnected worlds, whereas this one, and it kind of bleeds back into the pacing for me, is like, oh, goddamn, if I'm in Sector 2 and I want to go to Sector 5, I got to go up the elevator all the way back and like down there again, where like it would have been nicer to have like a more direct path. And like, sometimes even in Metroid Prime and Super Metroid, there's not really a direct path, but maybe it just feels like there is a little bit more.
I don't know. There's definitely times in Metroid Prime and Super Metroid where I'm just like, oh, this sucks. I have to go all the way back this way. Or like with Metroid Prime, there are definitely areas that aren't connected, and you have to take these really long loops. With Metroid Fusion,
Yeah, there's definitely those areas.
I
Yeah,
definitely don't
yeah.
think Fusion has that same problem. And also, usually when you're in an area, I never felt like, oh, I want to leave and go somewhere else. Usually there's a good reason why you're already there, already where you are, and you got to complete that, task, whatever it is, before you leave anyway. So it's never like, oh, I want to just go and, I guess again, because like, to me, I always feel like it's one big connected any area anyway. But yeah, one thing I like about this game is that I never feel like it's a slog or a chore to get from one way to another. Whereas sometimes in Super Metroid, sometimes in Metroid Prime, and other times in other games too, I'm like, damn, this is gonna take a while. This is some long backtracking, and that's not always enjoyable. I don't think Fusion ever has that problem, at least for me.
Yeah, I guess to an extent, I would agree with that. But I don't know that that's like a positive for me because I do like going back and like deviating from the course and collecting all my pickups and stuff. And I know that's not like necessarily your cup of tea. To finish off on areas here, I think that I would stick by like nothing inherently wrong. I don't think that any of them are like the best in the series, but I also don't think any of them are the worst in the series. Just like pretty solid. So
Yeah.
let's keep it going. Let's move on to enemies and bosses. Dak, I'm finally gonna break out the high score here. I'm giving this a 4. Fantastic bosses in this game. I think almost from start to finish. With actually the exception of like Ridley, I don't love that fight. I think he's just like super easy. But other than that, you've got like some really cool bosses in here. You've got our boy Arachnus. You've got what's the jump guy's name? Zazabi, Nightmare, Saris, as you mentioned, box security robot. Yakuza, the wicked spider, looks that's a really fun boss fight. I think that the Notori one is kind of weak in Sector 2, which we covered. But you know what, for the most part, there's like and of course SAX, can't forget about that. And the Omega Metroid. So yeah, I think that the bosses in this game are like really consistently really fun. The enemies in here are really fun. Lots of kind of cool little spins on like classic Metroid enemies. Like you've got the swimming space pirates, and you've got just like a lot of cool stuff like that. As I mentioned earlier, some enemies when you kill them transform into like other different powered up versions of enemies. So like I think that works really well. But yeah, this is a 4 mostly for the bosses. I feel like the bosses are a consistent high point in this game. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully something we can finally agree on.
Yeah. So I think this is definitely a two-parter, right? Because you have both bosses and enemies. So like non-boss enemies, of course. So bosses, you're looking at bosses like Metroid Fusion is so strong on that account, right? Like you have some of the most iconic bosses, I think, in the Metroid series. I think consistently the Metroid Fusion bosses are really good. Yeah, you have the SAX, which multi-phase boss, a multi-boss fight boss. The Omega Metroid's a really solid anchor and like really wraps up the entire game really well. Of course, I mentioned the box robot, which and Saris, which are two of my favorite 2D Metroid bosses. They really change things up in terms of the fight. Like Saris, you have small platforms, you're jumping over, you're getting knocked into the water, you're facing a boss that's just way faster than you. The box robot forcing you to fight on the monkey bars, and it's like, and obviously I love it even more after playing the Prime 2D demo. But a big my box fans, my boxers out there, where are you at? Love all the enemies, and yeah, the Ridley fight might be a bit easy. I'm still a big fan of it. So yeah, the bosses I think themselves are really good. The enemies too. Like if I were to I would give the bosses themselves like a 5, and maybe the enemies a 4. I think more like, I don't think there's as many standout non-boss enemies, but at the same time, I think they're all really effective. The X-Parasites are really good. That maybe they're in a league of their own in terms of like adding a new structure to the Metroid formula. I really do love the X-Parasites. So like maybe I'd give it a 4.5 and round it up. So I'm going to give it a 5. I think the bosses are great. The enemies are well done as well and really work with the story. All the different areas from like, Pyre, Sector 3, and then have like the little flying enemies in like Sector 6, the nocturnal site, like the zombie scientists, which were really cool. And then yeah, like the flow of fights where you kill an enemy and then you have the X-Parasites show up, and those add in another layer too. Classic takes on Metroid enemies that we're familiar with, as you said, plus some new ones which I really enjoyed. and they all felt really distinct, and they also didn't feel like they were just copy and pasted into Super either, even like the older enemies too. And even though Metroids are really not like prevalent in the story at all, I think that really isn't a problem for this game. Even like the space pirate designs, I love the space pirate design, like that, the purple space pirates, like their grayish like hair. I don't know, like they're weird looking. The bosses,
they're a standout, I think.
Yeah, they're so cool. The key hunters look really good in this game. Even like with the Hornodes, like, are just like a solid design that's not changed too much, but like looks good for the Game Boy Advance. So yeah, and then obviously like the SAX is just, that's such a good enemy design. Like it's literally Samus, but it's like not. It's like zombie Samus, but it's crazy how, you know, obviously Samus is such a strong and you know, devastatingly dangerous character that when you put her on the other side, essentially, right, like very scary. And you know, that one cutscene, right, like when you zoom in on the SAX's face, come on, that's like one of the most iconic you know, shots, cutscenes in the entire Metroid series. So overall, I'm gonna give bosses and enemies a whopping 5 stars. 5 out of 5.
I ain't mad at that. I ain't mad at that. All right, let's keep it going here. Let's talk about the expansions / collectibles / extras of this game. I rounded up here, Dak, and I am doling out, if you can believe it, another 4. You know me. I love going back and like rounding up and getting all the items. That's like one of my favorite things to do in Metroid. That sweet point where like you've finally got all your powers and you can like go and do literally anything and nothing is off limits to you anymore. There is some fantastic Shine Spark puzzles in this game, which, as you know, I'm a huge fan of. So some really great ones in this game. I think that you know, I kind of dumped on the areas being a little bit smaller and not as bite-sized, or not as like, you know, big and more bite-sized, but that does make it a little bit easier for going back and like rounding up and getting all of your items. So I do like that. Yeah, I think that there's, once you actually go in and you have all your power-ups, you can connect all of the sectors together directly, or at least a few of them. You probably don't need to at that point, but I do like doing that, especially because usually in like the little, like, I guess, brick from, or little block from one sector to another, you can see space, and I always thought that was really cool.
Yes.
I love the little extra cutscene of like the shadowy man in charge that you can unlock by like going all the way back. I think that there's a lot to like in terms of extras and collectibles and stuff like that. Every time I play Fusion, I think I go and sweep the board and get everything. So, you know, I'm never disappointed when I go in and do this. Lots of fun puzzles, lots of fun like expansions that you really got to think about. Like, okay, how do I get this? I feel like this game does a really good job of like kind of making sure that you're also like stocked up as well. So like there's the accessible expansions, but then like, you know, you never feel like you're underpowered, but I don't know that you ever feel like you're overpowered either. So I feel like it does that balance really well. So yeah, I think that this one's a 4 for me. It would have been a 3.5, but by God, I'm rounding up.
Boom, 5 from your boy Dak on this one. I'm sure you're shocked on that, but the reason I'm giving it a 5 is, number one, everything you said kind of is 100% I agree with. And that's why I was surprised that you said, oh, like, this might not matter to you as much because you don't like to go back and, like, get this kind of stuff, which you're definitely right in that assumption, and that is true most of the time. But Fusion is the exception. Fusion is the game when I play this game, I go and I collect a lot of the stuff. You know, I'm not always going for a collectible run or going for a 100% run, but that's the game where I will do a 100% run more often, or I'll go for more collectibles. I love that. When I first unlocked that scene, I didn't look up how to get that scene, by the way. When I got that scene, that was like, wow, that completely blew my mind. I was like, yo, like this, I actually was not a little disappointed, but I thought there would be more scenes like that, so I tried to like find them and I couldn't. But I thought that was really awesome. And, you know, obviously like the extra like collectibles you get like for finishing the game at the end, I always thought like those looks were really cool, and some of those outfits ended up in Smash, which was cool. Yeah, this is the one, like, one of the few Metroid like experiences out there for me where I do not mind going out for the collectibles and going out for more of them or trying for the 100%. Again, like the shortness of the game compared to other ones, I'm more likely to go out for all of them. I never feel like it's too much of a chore. I agree, there's some cool puzzles. Yeah, that's I think I'm gonna give it a 5 because with everything I agree with what you said makes it 4 worthy. But for me personally, the fact that like I'm never like, oh, I don't want to ever do that. I love going for the collectibles and getting stronger in this game. And yeah, you're right. It does a good job of, if you don't want to like max out, if you don't want to 100% it, you still have a good amount of stuff to deal with what the game throws at you. So it never feels like tediously difficult, which is the worst kind of difficult. So not that Fusion's really difficult in any kind of sense, but at the same time, it's nice not to have that kind of thing in the gameplay. So yeah, I give it a 5. But maybe that's some personal bias in there, but we don't do 4.5, so I'm rounding up.
Well, there you go. Both of us rounded up. Okay, Dak, I can't wait for you to give this next category a 5 too. let's talk about the music of the game. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to bury this softly?
Well, are we doing it's music and sound design, like audio design? Okay, because that's the thing is that I'm like, this game sometimes does not sound good. It is like crackling your speakers on your Game Boy. But some like music tracks in this game I think are good. Like I definitely think, and I think we've talked about this when we on a previous episode where I think because we were doing a mapping Metroid, is that, yeah, like this game doesn't have maybe like super standout tracks. It doesn't have like your Phendrana Drifts theme and whatnot, right? But I really think like the music is really good in this game. Like it's I think this game is a really immersive experience. Like I never find myself thinking like, oh, this is a theme, like, oh, this is a video game thing. Like everything just meshes together so well. The music is really a big part of that. It feels alive. It like ebbs and flows and like almost pulses a little bit in the background, and some of like, and it's perfectly, I think, really well done, especially for a Game Boy Advance game. Unfortunately, the hardware does not do it justice. And then you have instances like, the Ridley fight, which that's like, it's hard to judge that now because like part of me like ironically and now unironically likes that Ridley scream because it's like a meme, right? So like I like it now and it's funny, and I can't get that out of my head. I can't not like enjoy it because it's funny to me. But yeah, it's not good. It's hard to rank this because like if this game was remade or if it wasn't made on the Game Boy Advance, whatever, I think it would be fine. It's just that some of the ways I'm not a sound technician or whatever, but like it does, the Game Boy Advance like hardware and like some of the pitches that these sounds get at times do not mesh, do not gel very well at all. At the same time, yeah, it doesn't have some of those iconic standout tracks, so you can't like really quick and jump to something that like you'd want to go back and listen to maybe. But when I play the game, it all works really well, which I think is the most important thing. So this is hard. I know you're gonna give it like a 0 or a 1 or 2 or something. I can't give it a 4 or 5, but like I don't think it's like horrendous. I trust me, I've played horrendously sounding Game Boy Advance games, and Metroid Fusion is not that bad all the time. So I'm gonna give it a 3 in that regard.
I mean, I agree with what you said about the hardware holding it back. That's just a fact. It's a fact, but I mean, come on, this is a 1.
Yeah. Not surprised.
This is, the sound effects are consistently not very good, with the exception of the SAX's footsteps. I think that was done pretty well.
Yep.
But I played, I'm going to be honest, I actually didn't play Fusion all the way through. I played about an hour or two last week, but just to refresh myself when I was at my office today listening to, I put on the Metroid Fusion soundtrack while I was at my desk, and it's just, it's just not there. The technology's not there. But I also don't think that the themes are there either. Like there really isn't anything that really stands out. I think, other than like your other M's and your Federation forces, it's really, a forgettable soundtrack, which is too bad because I feel like even games like, you know, Return of Samus on the Game Boy and Metroid on the NES like had some really kind of catchy themes, and Metroid Fusion has, you know, the main theme that's kind of got that horror tinge is kind of neat, but you know, the technology just it wasn't there, and just yet another reason why this game is so ripe for a remake, because this is something that, man, if this was redone and they added just a little bit, you know, maybe they redid something, gave it the Samus Returns treatment, this could be something I think really special. But as it is now on the Game Boy Advance, yeah.
You know, I'm still gonna keep my score 3, but I'm gonna say that it was a 3.5 rounded down. The reason why is because I was thinking more as you were talking. I was like, I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I can go back, like, not even, like, I can just go back and think of, like, you know, the Ceres theme, for example. The Ceres boss theme, that's a really good boss theme from Metroid Fusion. I love that theme, and I wish it was in Smash Bros. Like, that stands out for me. I think the SAX theme is good as well. The main theme you mentioned, also good. So, like, I do, the Frozen sector, I think Sector 4 or whatever it is, or Sector 5, like, that theme I can vividly hear in my head. So I don't know, like, maybe it just because this game is more special to me, or not more special, but, like, I really love it, so, like, maybe that's why it sticks out in my head more, but I'm not going to say that those themes are on the level of some of the other more popular Metroid themes, but still, I do think they stand out a little bit and, like, are worth going back to and listening to. Still 100% agree that this game needs to be remade, man. I mean, would love that, and this is another reason, and I would love to see maybe, like, modernized versions of some of these themes. I do think this game, I think you're not giving it enough credit, but I hear what you're saying, and I definitely understand and I agree to a certain extent, but I also think that it has some stuff in there. It has some good stuff, and I'm imploring many of you to go back and give it a listen and see if maybe there's something that sticks out to you. But I think there's some good stuff in the Metroid Fusion OST, but it's not a Prime. It's not Metroid Prime. It's not Metroid Prime 2. It's not Super Metroid, right? I won't go that far, but I think I definitely don't think it's that bad. I definitely think it has some good themes and has some tracks in there that are memorable to me, at least. But to even it out with maybe this, like, the overall execution of it just at the time, still going to be a 3 for me, but I will clarify, it was a 3.5 rounded down.
You're going to laugh at this too, but, like, another reason that I'm not in love with the music here is because there's this really, I don't like this track at all. And it's the one that plays, like, whenever you talk to Adam, and it's like, do 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 do, and it's like that main theme, and, like, God, you just hear it over and over.
I love that theme. Oh, it's so good. Oh, I love that. That never gets old for me, man. You know what? Again, that's like a personal thing. I definitely get you. It plays a lot, but, like, that's like the Fusion theme, man. Like, that's like the, like, oh, I'm going on. I'm a detective. I'm going on a, you know, I'm sneaking around. I'm figuring out what the mystery is on the ship. I love that theme, man. That hits for me. I can hear that so vividly in my head. Yeah, that's Metroid Fusion.
You can't get it out.
That's, like, so iconic to me. Metroid Fusion, that's like, yeah, that's good. That's some good stuff right there.
So I apologize. I actually realized that I missed our very first category. So go me. So this is the last one. We've got the world and atmosphere of the game, and I feel like I know your answer, so I'm going to go ahead and say... Actually, you know what? Go ahead first, because I'm kind of torn here between a score, and I want to see if you can upsell me or if I'm going to keep it where I am.
Well, as I said earlier, I think this game is really immersive. I love the world of Metroid Fusion. I think world very much is part in terms of, like, you know, the locations and the settings, also the story, right? Like, it's a multifaceted thing, but the world constructed in Fusion... And, like, this overall setting, you're on this ship in the middle of space, and, like, you're uncovering, like, a government level conspiracy, and it's the result of past events from a previous game, and it works in new elements plus old elements of like the previous game and story, and it adds this, like, horror aspect that, like, Metroid really hasn't recaptured yet. I think in a way Metroid Prime 2 did, and somewhat Metroid Prime 3. But, like, that part of it, like where Metroid Fusion really feels like more of a horror game than the others. It's not like Dead Space or anything, or Resident Evil
Yeah.
maybe, but it's certainly more leans in that way. Metroid Fusion has its own character in that way. It's so, in a good way, removed a bit from other Metroid experiences. But that's kind of really why I like it. It gives, I think, Metroid, a little more depth, and it can be not just
Right.
one kind of thing. So, I love everything of I really love almost everything about Fusion. I got to give this a 5 as well. And I want to hear your thoughts too, because I'm sure you're not too far off on it, but I don't know if you're going to give it a 5.
No, I'm not going to give it a 5. See, what I would have given it is a 3.5. That's probably where I would have ended up, but I think I'm gonna give it a 3. I think I'm just gonna round down and give it a 3. I love the spaceship idea. I know that you're not super fond of the spaceship, but I do think that this game did a good job of like
No, I think
giving
the
you some
spaceship's
color and yeah, okay. So I like that idea, and I love the scenes with the SAX. I love the more horror aspects.
Yes.
I just like I feel like I'm beating a drum here. I really hate the vibe of like constantly having to go to Adam and interrupting what you're doing and talk to Adam. I think that the game would be scarier without him kind of directing you where to go. Like imagine if you were just lost and you were exploring the ship and you know that the SAX is out there and it's coming for you. You can still find a way to get that story. Like I don't know. I just like I wish that you could scan the environment like you can in Metroid Prime and have the story told to you that way. I just wasn't, and I feel like God, I feel like I've just beat this up like over and over and over again in this episode, and I don't mean to, but like I just really feel like the whole like navigation room really took away from like what I wanted in a Metroid game. As someone that had grown up playing Super Metroid, so. I think I'm gonna go with a 3. There are some things that I really love about this game: the horror elements, the creepy, like when you get to the restricted area and you see the Metroid breeding zone, like that is so cool. But I feel like every time I go to talk to Adam, I just die a little bit inside. So like,
I like Adam, man.
I think it's a 3.
Yeah, it's just for me, I like having a little back and forth for Samus to someone to bounce off of. Like, I don't always want to just be wandering around by myself. I like having someone or someone to talk to a little bit here and there. But I get what you're saying. And I like the ship part of this. I don't think like a ship in space is bad. Other M did it just so poorly, but with this game I think it's fine. It breaks up the flow of the other areas. And even then, like, yeah, the ship itself is still not just like, it's not like Shadow Complex. Like you can see like space in the background at times. You can see like some of the experiments when you go down to like the restricted area, and even before that, the quarantine zone. And the dock, like there's like the ship itself has all these small little areas too. I guess for me it's that like for you you're looking for something that was more akin to Super Metroid. For me, this was my first 2D Metroid experience, and I like that. If I want to, there are different kinds of. I think it's such a shame that Metroid doesn't have more games, right? Because I wish there were more Super Metroid like 2D Metroid games and more Metroid Fusion like 2D Metroid games. That way. There were more options for people who like the different styles rather than being like, oh, someone who's a big fan of Super Metroid, if they want to play more Super Metroid kind of stuff, well, they really only have Super Metroid as the option because Zero Mission kind of changes up a little bit. So is Metroid Fusion, so is Samus Returns, whatnot. And Metroid Fusion the same kind of way. But yeah, maybe it's partially because of expectations. Maybe it's partially because of just the type of game style we're looking for. I like Fusion for what it is. I definitely hear what you're saying, and I would like for more games that are like Super Metroid 2. And I think there are great games like that in the Metroidvania genre overall. I just wish they were Metroid games.
Yeah.
Because I like Samus, I like the Metroid universe. But for me, I thought Fusion was great because it had that anticipation. I was always like wondering what was happening next, and I was very like honed in on that. And the game really like pushes you in the right direction. It really gives you, I think, a fun, at times cinematic, but like mysterious and suspenseful. Like the suspense in this game is really good. A really suspenseful story. That's what I really liked about it. It's a very tight, concise, focused adventure. and that makes it a different kind of Metroid experience, but I still think it makes it really one of the best ones and my favorite one if we're going 2D. And for sure, it's something like, wow, like for me, it's like I know I love something when I want more of it and when I want the story to like want to keep reading, you know, when you have like a book you can't put down. And I know I love Fusion. Right. I know I love Fusion when like I've been waiting for the story to continue for 20 years, you know. There are certainly other stories where I've given up wanting them to continue, Game of Thrones, but this is one of the ones where I'm still hoping to, you know, curious to see what's next. And I think that's because Fusion did a really stellar job of telling its story, creating a world that I cared about, creating a scenario that was compelling, and characters that developed over time in an interesting way. Even Adam, who changes and you're not really like, that's another reason I like Adam in the game, because he's not only like a guide in a way and a like game wise and objective kind of setter, but you're not really sure what side he's on at one point, and then eventually you do really find out what side he's on, and I think that's a really good story moment. So yeah, I think this game is firing on all cylinders. I really wish we'd get a direct sequel to it. You know, the game's anniversary is November of next year, so maybe Nintendo will remember that it's 20 years old and throw it a birthday party. So who knows? But yeah, that's my final take on it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, here's hoping. And, you know, I wanted to give that that reminder, I guess, at the top of the episode that, you know, I'm putting on my critic's hat here, because if you're listening to this episode, it probably sounds like I hate Metroid Fusion. And I don't hate Metroid Fusion. I actually really like Metroid Fusion. Hate it. It's probably... It's like, it's probably in my top 5 Game Boy Advance games. Like, I think it's a great game.
Yeah.
Just, you know, I think I do prefer the Super Metroid style a little bit better, but I do like that they did more, like, this has had to do a story-driven Metroid game correctly, right? Mm-hmm. Like, as we talked about with Other M, there were some missteps there, and, like, yeah, I think Adam sucks. You know, people make fun of Navi from Legend of Zelda, but Adam is way worse. But you know what? With a remake, man, that pressure could just be alleviated so easily, Which is why I always say, like, man, I wish that Fusion could be remade. They could really, you know, ease back the pacing. They could upgrade the music. There's so much stuff that they could do. So yeah, I really hope that it's upgraded and remade. But our final scores here, Dak, are and I've divided from 10. So our final score at 5, Andy with 2.5 out of 5, and Dak with 4.4 out of 5. So for reference, our Metroid Prime 2 Echoes show, I had 3 and Dak had 3.3. So we are way different on this one, whereas that one we are more or less on the same page. So you love to see it. It's good stuff.
That sounds just about what I expected and sounds about right. I think a 4.4 is an absolutely perfect score for an absolutely near perfect game, and a 4.4 definitely represents that to me. So I thank you, Math, for helping me out. I appreciate that. Thanks, Andy, for doing that math for me, because I certainly wasn't writing those scores down. In fact, as we went through I had my notes, and I don't know why I did this, but as we went down, I deleted them. So I have no more notes left because we went through every category. So I don't remember what I put as my scores. So I'm glad you were keeping track. But yeah, that sounds about right.
Slow clap, buddy. All right, well, that is going to do it for our definitive ranking of Metroid Fusion. Let us know if you agree or disagree. You probably disagree with me, I bet you, for sure. Let us know over on Discord, Omega Metroid Discord, where you can get in on the action for next week. We have a Discord Q&A, so ask us anything about Metroid, and we will answer it next week. Make sure that you get your questions in, and you can come and hang out with us and, you know, chat Metroid and all the other fun stuff that's going on in the world of video games. Until then, we are going to get out of here. Of course, we want you to check us out over on Twitter. I am at Spateri316. Dak is at DakCity_, and we are at Omega Metroid Pod. And of course, we want you to check out the podcast over on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts. You know the drill. Like and subscribe. Leave us a sweet 5-star review if you think we've earned it. And tell a Metroid fan in your life where they can get their weekly Metroid fix. That's it. That's all. We are out of here. We will see you back here next week. Take care.